Welcome, everybody, to the Customer Success Leadership Roundtable. I'm Andrew Marks, the co-founder and chief product officer for the Success Coaching Training Program. Thrilled to be leading this discussion on change management and customer adoption. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've empowered over 35,000 students from nearly 100 countries with our globally acclaimed customer success professional development program. Whether it's self-paced online learning or dynamic virtual boot camps, we've got a program that suits your team's unique needs. You can find all the details on our website, successcoaching.co, or in the chat where Ashley will provide links and any coupon codes we're offering. And I believe, Toby, we're providing a coupon code today for, go figure, your change management offering. So for newcomers, this is where real-world advice meets practicality. We invite industry experts to share their experiences, ensuring our discussions remain grounded in the everyday challenges of customer success. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the size of the customers your teams deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get going. This webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay and transcript on our website early next week. We encourage active participation, so please feel free to ask your questions using that Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom interface. Questions with higher upvotes will receive priority during the Q&A session. And for our LinkedIn Live audience, you can also post your questions directly, and they will be relayed to us. Thank you, Santana. To maintain a smooth discussion, please use the chat window exclusively for commentary while directing your questions to the Q&A window. We thank you for your engagement. It really makes this webinar truly special and valuable. In the world of customer success, you'll find plenty of smart ideas and theories, but in this series, we're all about getting real. We're here to talk practical advice, tried and true tricks, and stories from folks who live and breathe customer success every day. That's why we've got three amazing panelists with us today. And in a rare case, they're all returning panelists. It's awesome. They're actually, they're coming back for more abuse. These are people who really know their stuff, and we can't wait to hear what they've got to say. So without any more delay, let's kick things off by having our panelists introduce themselves to y'all and tell us a bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Miss Friday. Jenelle.
Thanks, Andrew. Hello, everybody. I'm Jenelle Friday. I currently am the VP of Customer Success at a startup called Forecastable. Pretty cool things we're doing in the co-sell space. My specialty is actually emotional intelligence. So trying to get my feet underneath me with that, but just thrilled to be here. And thanks for having me back, Andrew.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jenelle. And emotional intelligence is a customer success superpower.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Great.
Katie, you are up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Mach. Glad to be here again. I've spent about the past 5 years as the Director of Enterprise Client Management at Scoopos. Recently got acquired by PDI Technologies, and so I've been tasked with starting up their account management team. So lots of change management going on in my life, both internally and externally with clients. So happy to chat with you guys today.
I bet. Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for joining us again. And last but not least, our first strategic content partner and author of our popular Change Management for Customer Success program, Toby.
Thanks, Andrew. Toby Lucich with Return Leverage. Yeah, I've loved being part of the journey here with the Success Coaching team, and that the work that I do is actually coming in, working with organizations to help shape both their change management strategies and how they take it to market, but oftentimes as well with clients, figuring out how do we absorb this big changes. So whether it's strategy, whether it's how we work, org design, or adopting new tools to drive the business forward. All of these things are colliding, and sometimes we don't have visibility to that from the outside. So anyway, delighted to be joining this group and excited for today's talk.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for being here today. Let's get to our topic. So change management in customer success. Is it a necessary evil or a catalyst for growth? I know I use evil, okay, but I want to kind of mix things up a little bit. In a world where businesses are constantly evolving, customers are often left to navigate the turbulent waters of change on their own. As customer success professionals, we have the power to either leave them adrift or guide them to shore. While some may argue that change management is a time-consuming and resource-intensive endeavor, the truth is that neglecting it can have far-reaching consequences. poor adoption rates, increased churn, and damaged customer relationships are just a few of the potential repercussions. So let's start with this question. Is change management a burden we must bear, or is it an opportunity to differentiate ourselves and drive customer success to new heights?
I can start us off. I'm definitely camp opportunity on this one. I think if we think about what change management is, it's at its core, it's really influencing people to do things differently. If you think about what CS is at its core, it's about teaching people to do things differently, better, more effectively. So I think it kind of just lays out the groundwork of what we're going to be doing in our jobs and with our clients and with our services and our software. So it's not a burden, it's an opportunity for us to really differentiate ourselves from our competitors, from other people in the space, and it really just kind of formulates that foundation for us.
Janelle, Toby, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for me, change management is always an opportunity because it's an open door for me to wow somebody, honestly. I mean, when change management happens, my first thought is, what do I need to do to ease the minds of the people going through the change? Because I think for a lot of us, change is scary, but it's the one constant in business. And so we need to be able to pivot quickly, but understand that when we pivot, it impacts our customers, it impacts our people, and to be overly communicative and make sure that they understand the impact, and we're encouraging them not to be afraid of the change, but help them through the change. So it's a complete opportunity, in my opinion.
I love that. I'll take the opposite position and say it's a necessary evil. And I put a big asterisk on that. If your customers are forced into a compliance state and your product is non-negotiable, don't waste your time and energy. If all of your customers are highly compliant and never resist, don't waste your time. If you're not dealing with humans, it's completely unnecessary. So depending on your offering, I would agree. It's absolutely evil. And let your customers figure it out. In the event that you don't check all three boxes, then I think you're in the right webinar. So,
which is like 80-90% of the folks out there, right?
Yeah. For that 10%, though, they just got an hour back, right? So
actually, just a reminder, we go for 75 minutes. So, but yes, they got an hour back. So how have you seen, so I've been waxing poetic for years about driving adoption is not just, riding up and teaching them how to use the product, right? It is an exercise in change management. It's so easy for people to fall back to the old way of doing things because that's the safe way, right? Why are we making this change? Why don't we just do it the other way? How have you seen change management directly impact customer adoption rates in your experience?
I'm happy to jump in with just a quick example, and then we can pinball. But so oftentimes we don't think about this change management dimension until after things are implemented and it's time to move into training. And I think that the missed opportunity there is that what we've just done is sprung a surprise on an entire workforce. And so in terms of driving that adoption, it starts way back closer to the buy decision rather than the go live. And just think about how we shift those dates. What we're doing is giving people some time to wrap their head around a change. And so I think about, having a kid and having a window of 9 months to get your head around that and start to organize your life to anticipate it. That's a perfect example of change. Some things take a while for us to get into. But when we're teasing it, when we're telegraphing where we're going, they're able to stay with us through that turn. And so it's less of a starting flat-footed, and they're already moving and they're stretched and they're ready to lean in. So
Katie, you're a new mom. Did you apply change management techniques? or is it a necessary evil?
I think there's been a lot of change management in my life between work and professional. I think now I'm just a master of change management. But yeah, I mean, I think and everything in life, right? To Janelle's point earlier, change is scary, and you're kind of hesitant to do it, and you kind of you're going to drag your feet. You're going to see if there's a shortcut. You don't want to rework all your processes and things like that. And this is where I think it kind of gets into the adoption question a lot too, is when you have a team that you're struggling to get them to be open to the change, you're going to have adoption happening onesie, twosie, kind of pulling teeth. You'll start to see user counts go up or hours or whatever KPIs you're kind of tracking. When you've really gotten like the team, and to Toby's point, when you've started it early, when everyone's on board, you're going to see those numbers higher from the start. You're still going to get those people who are trickling in, right? The people who really were like, we don't want to do this, I'm not getting on board. And then eventually those teams will start pulling those people forward. And then I think you can really kind of tell when you've gotten strong adoption when they start going to other teams or start giving you product feedback features or asking what's next. And like, that's kind of the moment that, okay, we have good adoption. It's just not just my KPI looks good. It's okay, we're really cooking with gas now.
Hey, Jenelle, how does empathy play a role in change management from your perspective?
I mean, I think it's critical. One thing I work a lot with people on are root causes. So when we talk about change management and people are afraid of change, what's driving that fear? It's probably fear of the unknown. It's fear that it's going to create more work. It's fear that it could maybe divulge that they're not doing their job correct. Like there's a lot of fear around multiple things when you install a new product or when you release a new product. And so empathizing with the impact it's having, not just on the executive decision maker and their choice to sign on, not just on your daily practitioner, who is the one who is going to probably install or manage that change internally, but then championing them by making sure that, for me, it's managed expectations. So it's being overly communicative with the people involved and being empathetic to, this is a huge lift for them, and I need to make sure that they have everything they need in order to manage that change effectively. And that's hard to do depending on the kind of change we're talking about.
And so and I want to get all your perspectives on this. I definitely have my own perspective here. Is it your responsibility in your role as customer success, either as a leader or your team, is it your responsibility to drive that change, or is it your responsibility to arm your key, because you mentioned key stakeholders, Jenelle, is it your responsibility to facilitate that through the key stakeholder, to arm them with what they need to drive the change?
I do. I think that's a huge part of the role of a CSM. I mean, there's so many names that we call a CSM: a trusted advisor, right? A coach, a trainer, there's so many names. And I think when we really take trusted advisor to heart, it means that when big things happen and you're the person that they turn to, it is your responsibility to make sure they have the help that they need, the resources that they need, the why, so that they can become a champion if they understand the why. But yeah, I do think that it falls on your shoulders to make sure that no matter what the change is, that you're you're kind of coming alongside as a partner to whoever at the customer level is going to be doing all those things, because they're going to need an outlet. They're going to need to ask questions. They're going to need to ask for help. They're going to need a vent when the change doesn't go well, or they can't figure out why it's not working. And usually that's the CSM.
Okay, so you believe, I just want to make sure, I just want to restate that you believe that the customer success manager should act like the facilitator for the key stakeholders who are ultimately responsible for driving change.
Well, maybe not the facilitator, because I can't go into that organization and force the change, right? But I'm going to be a huge linchpin in if that change management or that change is effective, because ultimately I'm the one helping support the people who are doing the work to make the change, right? So facilitate wouldn't be the right term, but responsible for sure.
You're an enabler. You're helping the key stakeholders. You're enabling them. So my point is I've had these conversations before with customer success managers, like, how do I drive adoption? I'm like, actually, technically what you do is you arm the key stakeholder. You as a vendor are not going to drive adoption. Okay. You as a vendor are going to provide key stakeholders with the tools and the support that they need to drive adoption. Right, Toby?
Right.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's very much a consultative relationship that we're talking about, right? We have influence power, and we have all of our resources, and we have a network of past clients that we can connect them with and share success stories to demystify this change. But ultimately, one of those elements that that I love at the outset. And Andrew, you and I have talked about how some organizations have CSM show up after implementation. Others will have them showing up as early as the point of implementation, immediately following the sale. And so there's a missed opportunity if you're not bringing your CSMs in early, because there's all of this joint suffering that happens during implementation, big and small. And it's a chance to bond and to become more than just a transactional partner. And so to that point about empathy, one of my favorite things to do early on, even if I've already got the information, is to start to ask this core team, talk to me about why the way you've been doing business is no longer adequate.
Right.
Why can't we continue? Because if we miss the opportunity to capture that pain point and make sure that everybody's heard it and has agreed it, then it's going to be really easy to second guess it throughout the life cycle of the account, right? We need to know what they're trying to move away from to drive that initial adoption.
And that's really important, not only to drive the initial adoption, but to make sure everybody's all, on the same page. Because typically what you see is you see these key stakeholders saying, okay, we need to make a change. We're going to go buy this service. We're going to go buy this solution. And then they tell their people, hey, we're doing this, right? And so you've got these people who've already made this decision to make the change, and the rank and file individual contributors are just figuring it out. They're just going, wait a minute, this is news to us.
Well, so, we talk about executive leaders kind of living in the future relative to their workforce and their customer base. They need to be coming to a place where they believe it to be true if we're going to act on it. And so when they offer that edict, hey, we've bought this product and therefore you shall use it, the best we get is compliance. And so having implemented some very large ERPs only to watch people continue to work in Excel sheets, there's an opportunity there, right? There's a breakdown. And so if we're going to have people lean into it, they have to want it. And so some of this early on is demystifying it, but also giving them a reason to want to make the move. So yeah, I believe in it.
I want to get into some of the tools that actually you talk about in your training course, but we're going to follow up with that. We'll get to that before we get to questions. And by the way, folks, please use the Q&A window to ask questions. We will get to questions here, I don't know, in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and we will answer as many questions as we can between now and quarter past the hour when the webinar ends. And also, if you see a question on that list that is particularly interesting to you, you can upvote that, and that will move it up the list. Hey, Katie, any challenges? Some of the you want to share some of your most common challenges that you faced when implementing change management strategies and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I think one of the big things, and we've kind of been talking about this too, of like who owns making sure that there's some change management happening. And I think what Jenelle and Toby were saying is exactly spot on. Like we are responsible for creating that environment, right? But it does really start with sales, which I know everyone doesn't like to pit CS against sales, but we're always kind of boxing. But it is their role to work with the buyers to really kind of flesh out why they need this product or why they need to change the way they are doing things. And that's where the change management starts, right? Those buyers need to be very clear about what they're going to get out of this. And then I think it's the CS's team's kind of responsibility to come in and build that environment around them. And so the biggest pushback that I've always seen is, our biggest kind of hurdle is that buyer wants this. They see the future. They're thinking pie in the sky. This is going to be amazing. This is so easy. My new software team has an implementation manager. They have a CS manager. They've got some subject matter experts. They've got me covered, right? But then they kind of shield away from that. They don't want the responsibility of telling their teams, I'm going to uproot everything that we were doing. Even if you told me how much you hate it, it's going to be a lot of work. And so I think the biggest change that I've made through the various teams I've worked on is having in our kickoff slides stuff around change management, kind of demystifying it, talking about it in the open, being open with, the team members that are not going to be very happy about this, and kind of just saying like, hey, we're all going to be along for the ride. Getting that executive sponsor to be on those calls and talking about the change and kind of reinforcing the why behind everything, I think has been the most successful. When they see their leaders really kind of doubling down on this and that they're going to be involved, even if they don't want to come along with it, they know they're going to be asked by their boss. So it kind of starts to pull things. And then I think showing them success along the way, right? showing them what competitors have done or other people in the space have done and what they're doing now, kind of going through some of those same pain points, saying like, hey, we're in the trenches together. We've been here before though with other clients. The other side's going to be a little bit better. And then when you start getting some of those small wins, start reiterating those back to the team members. Hey, this only took you 10 minutes. It used to take you 20. Hey, we got this thing streamlined, and just being very transparent about where you're at in the process and not shielding away from kind of like the bad part of it, because we all know it's tough. But then doubling down on the highs with your clients and with their teams, and anywhere else that you can be to get kind of people's motivation up as well.
Jenelle, you any challenges beyond what Katie's laid out?
I mean, I am starting to adopt the mindset that when sales and CS are truly partners, they're a pretty powerful team. And so we actually bring in me right now, but it'll be a CSM at a certain stage in the sales opportunity. And so what we do is we do a discovery call with the customer, with the sales. So there's a download beforehand. And I'm there to make sure that the customer fits the ideal customer profile, that we're keeping sales accountable to the types of customers we know are going to be successful with what we're doing. And it also allows me to set expectations with that decision maker to say, you don't get to just sign the contract and like disappear. I need your influence to make sure that the people who are going to be implementing this or teaching this as a new method or new, technology to your team, I need your voice, because I'm not you and I can't force things. And so I think, again, by managing expectations up front so that people know what they're getting into, they know the why, you're setting up that whole scenario for success by painting a picture of what this actually looks like once you sign the dotted line. And then that whole transition from sales to post-sales is much easier to manage because the customer is in the whole way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get a lot of commentary from customer success managers and even some leaders. Are like, well, yeah, the key stakeholders signed off on the dotted line, but they're an executive. They're too busy. They're going to go be doing all this other stuff, and we're going to have to drive it ourselves. And I push back on that. I'm like, listen, this person, they brought you in, right, because they wanted to solve a problem that is likely tied to one of their own personal MBOs.
Yeah.
And they have a vested interest in adoption happening, right? So you just need to be very clear, especially from the outset, like you said, in the sales process. Hey, we're going to solve these problems, but a big piece of this is you, the executive stakeholder, even though you might have all these proxies, you're going to help get through the onboarding and yada, yada, yada. We're going to need you to be kind of the mouthpiece for that change. Right. And so I'm a huge fan of, we worked with a number of customers on this as well, creating this thing called a change management toolkit, right? Which is, has tools like some of the stuff, Toby, that you teach in your change management class. So things like the case for change and a communications pyramid and what am I, the WIFM. You want to go into a little detail about some of those key things, Toby, that are important, so that the folks here understand not just about the concept, but there's an opportunity here for you to apply some of this stuff in your own books of business.
Yeah, I want to touch on something before tooling for a quick second.
Sure.
And you were speaking about some of the conversations you're having with leaders. If I could wave my magic wand, however that takes place, what I would love to do is at that point where a buyer and our sales team are coming to some agreement, that's the point that I'd love to inject some expectations.
Yeah.
Because the cheapest part, the most least expensive part of adopting something new is often the sticker, whether it's, learning to drive a new electric vehicle, even though you may have driven for years, or whether it's using just a different brand of software that has a different navigation. We need somebody to be advocating, and to have the leaders staying visible and also kind of swimming in it and owning the problem. That's the gap that I most often see. And so they'll make a buy decision, they'll move forward, and then it's an edict. Thou shalt go forth and implement this. And not always, right? We all have a spectrum of clients. But to your point about tooling, sometimes it's once that decision's been made, things have started moving, the commercial side is complete, and we're gearing up towards implementation. One of my favorite tools is the case for change that you mentioned a second ago. And it's really just starting to probe around the edges of why isn't yesterday good enough for tomorrow? And so many organizations, even though I've yet to meet an organization at stasis. Everybody's in some sort of change, but it's the very rare organization that invests in almost a secondary operating system that specifically facilitates this ongoing change in an intentional way. So anyway, case for change is a great way to pull out those problems and challenges. And then you also mentioned WIFM, which is one of my favorites. And that's how we take a list of the problems we're avoiding and then what the new world will be, and we start to localize it. WIFM is just one of these horrible acronyms. What's in it for me? But what's in it for me is going to be different based on how people interact with your solution. And so, I often talk about even an organizational change, just a change in power structure, reporting lines has enormous consequences. And it all depends on where you're sitting in terms of how that's experienced. So the WIFM is a great way to also make sure that all of your stakeholders have something that they're experiencing. We oftentimes touch on stakeholders collectively. We just think everybody will experience it in a uniform way. But WIFM is a way to validate that people are all experiencing the change or not.
The WIFM for a CFO is different than the WIFM for the head of finance, is different than the WIFM for the accountant.
Yeah.
Right? At the basic level, the WIFM for the accountant may be, I want to be able to get through my accounting work so I can, by 5 o'clock, so I can go home and watch my kid play soccer. The WIFM for the director of finance is, I want to be able to have a streamlined collection process. And the WIFM for the CFO may be, hey, I want to borrow money at lower interest rates, which means I got to get my DSO down. And having better cash flow is going to result in that. But I think it's important that you're recognizing that. Also, the other thing I want to point out is there are stakeholders from individual boots on the ground all the way up to the senior executives that play a role in driving adoption. One of my part of my secret sauce back in the day when I was selling enterprise software and implementing enterprise software was finding some of those individual contributors that just loved what we were doing and used them to drive adoption amongst their team, finding those people that were influential across their team, people respected them, and getting them, over-indexing on them with extra training and extra understanding and helping them drive adoption for us.
Andrew, that's a beautiful pairing. If you have an executive that is prepared to relinquish authority or give authority over to somebody that's excited and let them run with it, it looks radically different.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so our ability to solve is oftentimes constrained by how much authority leadership will release to those teams that are trying to make this happen.
I also think a huge caveat to change is accountability. Right. I've talked to a lot of people in customer success who are like, oh, no, we can't say that to the customer. And I'm like, why? They paid for your product. They're expecting results. If they don't give you what you need to drive those results, then we need to hold them accountable. And I think that that's a really hard term right now for a lot of people in CS. There's a lot of fear in potentially pushing up against a customer and making them unhappy. And in my experience, and I don't know about the rest of you, but in my experience, it's not my job to make the customer happy. It's my job to make the customer successful with what they purchased. Yes. So if I have to come up against an executive and be like, dude, you've been MIA for 3 months, and that's why we're not seeing the results because you're not authorizing the changes that we need to make. That's on you. That's not on me. I'm not you. So to some of this, I also feel like too, we need to encourage CSMs to be more confident and more bold 100%. In holding players at the customer level accountable for the work that they need to do or the things that they've said they're going to do to move the needle forward.
Yeah, if you have a hard time holding people accountable, you're in the wrong job.
Fully agree.
I hate to put it that way, but yeah, at the end of the day, there's accountability on both sides, and
but that comes from the top too, Andrew. It has to come. I mean, a CSM can't do it if the leadership doesn't support it. And I think I'm seeing a mix of both. It has to come from the top down. And I think a lot of startups are scared to do that sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, Katie, you're implementing customer success or account management now in this new company that purchased you. What are you doing to prepare those team members for supporting customer stakeholders in actually driving change?
Yeah, I think, Janelle is like spot on, right? Like you need to enable this team and show up as a leader that some of these uncomfortable conversations are going to happen and you're there to support them, right? And what we're doing right now is taking a little bit more of a sales focused team and kind of flipping them over to more of a CS team. So I'm sure you guys anyone who's in CS is like a salesperson's coming over.
You just changing their title? You just changed your title from account manager to customer success. I thought it was as simple as that.
Yeah. And so I think I've been very transparent with my team of like, we're going to get into some hard situations. We're going to get into some things that you're probably not used to doing, but like, I'm here, I can show you how to do it. I can help you facilitate. I'm also going to back you up. If I get a call from an angry client, I'm not going to throw you under the bus right away. And I've just made it very transparent with my team that that's how I'm going to lead them. Right. Like if I get a call from a client that's real mad, I'm going to find out why. If it's something that, if they really did something, we'll have a different conversation. If it's the way our process is working, or to Janelle's point, if we're just holding their feet to the fire because we need something, I'm happy to have that conversation with the client too and be like, look, they're right. You bought this software for a reason. And if you're not giving my team what they need, I'm going to support them and calling you out on it. Like that's how we're going to move forward. So I think a lot of that, and I think with my team too, we're doing a lot of change management. So we're kind of also, it's an easy way to show them that they're also going to have to do this outward. So, when I'm saying, hey, expect these changes, we're not going to see a difference day 1. It's going to be day 30, day 60, where we really get moving with this. They can take some of those same lessons, and we've been open about that, and say, now you can take this to your client, have the same conversation. So I think they're getting a little taste of it that way. But I mean, after this webinar, I probably do need to do some more change management training with my team and have a little bit more in depth. Send them to Toby's course.
There you go. Love that. And quite frankly, if you deal with a leader, any key stakeholder in an organization that you're doing business with, and they push back on accountability, they either have one foot out the door, so they just don't care, or they're just bad at their job. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that signed off on this, right? Companies don't spend money just to spend money. They signed off on this, and a big part of them getting value, getting a return on their investment, is getting their people to actually do what needs to get done to change the way they do things, right? And they're changing the way they do things with you because there was a problem. And so, you like you said, Jenelle, you have to be bold. You can't be afraid to have those difficult conversations, and you can't be afraid to push back.
Yeah.
Toby, what do you think is what's from your experience? What's something important that customer success teams can do to prepare themselves for supporting change management in their customers?
I'm going to go back to something Jenelle led with, and it's this idea of empathy. And it doesn't take long when we're using a new product, or when we come into an organization, to shift from being new to going, this is how we work. Our clients are in that very same boat. And so, this notion of accountability goes hand in hand with what your culture is. And if you're working with clients that still have a traditional top-down directive, and there's consequences for error, then the cost of risk is astronomically high. And I so wish that organizations, when they were thinking about what their ideal client looked like, I wish accountability was part of that. I wish learning culture was part of that. They're just hard to know when you're prospecting and trying to drive top-line revenue. But those are absolutely the things that make all the difference. And so one of those things that as a CS leader you could do would be ask your team who's very fluent in your product, let's take a day or half day. But what we're going to do is repeat some of the things we know well, but do it in our competitor's tool. Let's fire it up. We'll do a trial instance. And what we thought was very usable and useful because we've learned, therefore we now think it's intuitive. What we discover is that our products aren't always as usable as we want them to be. Right? We've just become accustomed to it. And I think it's hard to reconnect with that learner mind, but that's really what we're asking our clients to do. Create some space to make some mistakes. And so we'll set up sandboxes, or lean in and take the risk of doing something you've not done before. But that's a hard thing. It requires a lot of consensus and a lot of joint commitment.
Yeah, but once again, it starts from the top. We got to have that buy-in from the top. Let's how about we do this? How about we take some questions? We're about 20 minutes before the hour. We got a dozen questions in there. So I asked my guests to take a look at those questions. And if you want to jump in first, to go ahead and hit that answer live button, and we'll start asking some questions of you all from our guests. So our first question comes from Melissa. Melissa, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the question. How have you managed change management when your customer base varies both in its level of tech savviness and organizational project culture? Oh boy, I got an answer for this too, but Katie, looks like you want to jump in on this as well.
Yeah, I'm going to pull from one of your answers from a previous talking point today. So maybe that was already your answer. So I don't mean to steal your thunder, but
oh, no worries.
I think there's a couple of things that we can do. And again, it goes back to like creating that environment for change management to happen. And by this, I don't mean, I've seen this in CS a ton, bending over backwards, doing things for clients, like jumping in and doing it for them. I think it's really the enablement and the environment. And Andrew, to your point earlier, find those ICs that are very interested in your product and leverage them. They can, even if it's just like, hey, who do you think I should tap to help shepherd this or to help do this? Or can you kind of give me a behind the scenes look at the tech savviness of your team? And then, using Toby's point that he just mentioned, you can build sandboxes. For those that aren't super tech savvy, aren't super cozy, that's not you doing their job for them. It's just providing them a space that they can make those mistakes, that they can mess around. And, there's no big consequences for them. And you can do extra trainings, which is extra work for you. But again, just kind of thinking overall how you can best create a very good learning environment for the team and then leverage the people on the team, whether that's an exec, whether that's an IC, to come in and help. And this kind of, I've seen this kind of theme in some of the other questions too, of like, where do we go when we're stalled? I think those same tactics work kind of across the board, is like looking at what resources you have and trying to tap into those without creating too much work on your CS plate.
Toby, Jenelle, anything to add before I share my example?
I would just say that this idea of the tech savvy continuum, right? Every organization has it, and being really technically fluent isn't always a gift. Because it's too often, these most expert technologists want to get into the guts of it and how we made the sausage. And what we've sold them is just a way to, to move transactions through the machinery. And so there is something to be said about introducing some guardrails and setting some expectations that I think gives teams permission to not feel like they're playing their traditional role. That explorer that is always seen as the technical tip of the spear, it's nice for that person to be able to relax a little bit and also tell them, we'll get there. But right now we need everybody to be able to click around the screen and understand how to navigate, So there's a lot of permissioning that we have the power to do because we're the experts when we're meeting with clients when it comes to our solution.
And I would just say not one size fits all. So we as CS organizations cannot go into any customer circumstance or any new customer contract, assuming that the program that we've had success with other customers is going to be the same. I think it goes back to the discovery piece of this, that if you can't do discovery before the sale, but you can do it afterwards, it means you're asking disruptive questions. You're having a full-blown conversation with executives to understand, why did you purchase this? Why now? What problem are we solving for? What is it going to take to get there? To Katie's point, who are the players? Who's responsible? If we're not asking those questions right out of the gate, then we are stuck when something happens, chasing our tails, trying to figure out, well, how do we pivot because we didn't know the answer to this? So I think a huge part of this is there needs to be almost like this deep breath before the launch of something, because we have to we have to lay the groundwork so that we can see success. We know what it's going to take to find success through all this change, and we're communicating through understanding where the customer is coming from and what their goals are because we've asked the right questions.
When I was head of customer success for Voxer, which is an over-the-top communications platform that the old Nextel push-to-talk walkie-talkies. We had, on one end of the spectrum, we had signed a deal with the San Francisco 49ers, which at the time was the most advanced stadium in the NFL. A whole story about going to the first Niner game there and all that stuff. But they had these basically, they were like Genius Bar people that you see in an Apple store, but they had these people running around the stadium helping people with the technology, and they were all 20-something kids that understood tech, that grew up on tech. And so for them, it was a video with a narrative that helped them understand what was in it for them in their role. At the other side of the technology spectrum, we also had Roto-Rooter Plumbing as a customer. Okay. And it had like 500, 600 seats at Roto-Rooter. And these were tradespeople. These are plumbers that are getting a smartphone for the first time. And for them, in addition to the narrative being different for them, what we did is, instead of doing some fancy video training and stuff like that, we created a 2-page cheat sheet that said, hey, when you have this type of situation, do this. And here's how you would do it. And we had pictures, of the user interface in the phone. Here, you click here and click here. And it was something that they could then print out and stick in their locker, put in their van, and pull it out if they needed a refresher. So I think you need to your point, Melissa, you need to change your narrative. You need to change your tools. You need to adjust based off of who your user audience is. Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for the question. Katie, if you could hit the done button for me, and we'll move on to our next question here. Our next question comes from anonymous attendee who tends to show up at every one of these. Anonymous asks, what is the best way to drive adoption buy-in of end users when executive leaders don't have clear goals defined? Ooh, this is a challenging one. How can we drive leaders towards setting clear goals when the response to goal setting is we want to play it by ear, or we want them to explore before setting goals? And Jenelle, looks like you want to jump into this one first. I have a feeling what you're going to say. Go for it.
Well, I mean, I want to answer this because I've been in this circumstance before, and it's really frustrating as a CSM when a leader's like, yeah, I don't really know how we're going to measure this. I just want to kind of see how it goes. And I'm like, how is that? I don't understand how to drive success that way, because without a goal in sight, it means we're just kind of flopping around the track trying to figure it out. And that's not a good use of my time, of the money that you've invested, of the team that you have that are trying to implement this. So to me, this is the CSM kind of pulling up your big girl pants and saying, this needs goals. We need to have measurable, drivable results so that we can testify to, yes, this is a good return on investment, or we're so far out of the park, we got to start over. So I'm someone who would push back on that later and say, that's not how this is going to go. Like, it's not an okay answer. So it's a pushback, but it's also, if you're getting a leader that's responding that way, again, I'm going to go back to the root cause. Why are they disengaged that way? Maybe it's because they don't have the answers from their executives. Maybe it's because they were handed this project and they're like, I don't know, just figure it out as you go. It's an assumption of positive intent from people when they don't fit the parameters that they're supposed to be, or meeting you where you need them to be. It's engaging and asking questions and getting to root causes to really understand, why do people behave the way they behave, especially leaders at customer levels that just don't do what we need them to do. There's other factors that I think a lot of us forget are in their purview because of the position that they hold. So, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I don't have any problem being like, no, that's not acceptable answer. Try again, please.
Well, when you get that kind of answer, though, do you throw on your consultant hat and say, okay, well, because you clearly, like you said, you clearly have somebody who doesn't get it, or is just too burdened with other stuff on their plate. And with the thing we got to remember here, especially with these key stakeholders at that level, they're looking at stuff a mile wide and about an inch deep, right? So, we want to be able to kind of help them down the path. So like a good consultant does, do you sit there and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Until they say, oh, that sounds good. Right. And then get them to buy into it before, pushing them to drive that with their team.
I think you take advantage of the people who've gone before you and the work you've already done. So if you're a good CSM, you know your company and you know your product. So I can go to a customer and say, okay, here's the smorgasbord of things that you can choose from that are going to drive adoption, that are going to measure how we're doing. Which one of these things look best to you? So if your customer's like, I don't know, then go a step ahead and help them out. So I literally have a menu of reports that our customers can choose from because we use Pendo, so that they have a list, but they don't get to just say, oh, we're not really going to follow that. It's like, no, here's your list of things. Which ones are going to apply to you? I'm leading them in the direction that they want to go because they don't know what they don't know. They don't work for us. They don't know the product. They're dealing with it. So help your customer out and think proactively to how you can empower those leaders to make those decisions because you've given them the choices of what they could be engaging with, maybe.
And sometimes they need to be reminded that, hey, for you to get a return on this investment, I need your help here, right?
Right.
And for you to look like the smartest person in your company or embracing what we are offering, you can totally play the ego card. I'm trying to help you look good to your boss, or I'm trying to help you not look bad to your CFO for wasting money. Right. And sometimes you got to have that type of conversation.
And that's not easy, I think.
No.
And a lot of those folks, if they're in a director, VP, C-suite position, a lot of the individuals that talk about how it's difficult to have those conversations because it's intimidating, right? We're intimidated by job title. We're intimidated by the company they're at. And I think to that level of degree of intimidation, somehow as a CSM or anyone in CS, you've got to get over that. Because if you allow a job title to intimidate your ability to do your job, it means that you're not an effective CSM. You've got to find that internal fortitude within you to say, this is my job. I'm supposed to be helping you become successful. So through kindness and empathy, respectfully, I need more from you.
Yeah.
And I've never, when you approach it through that respect and through that empathy, I've never had a leader at a customer account go, no, or push back. Usually they're very responsive, say, okay, you're right. I know you need my help. Okay, let's book 30 minutes and let's just hammer it out. Right.
Unless they literally have one foot out the door. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Toby, Katie, anything to add to Jenelle?
I love Janelle's earlier comment about one size does not fit all. And so oftentimes when we first meet a client, we have all these assumptions about conversations that have taken place. And so I think it's, that's a task for us to own, is clarifying those assumptions. We can do our pre-work internally and talk with sales and understand what they've discussed, but oftentimes we don't know if this is a number one priority for the client or if this is number 342nd.
Right.
And when we talk with these executives, one foot out the door or not, they'll tell us if this is one of their top three priorities. And honestly, if it's not, then the hard conversation to have is, who can you delegate it to, make them accountable, and it will be one of their top three priorities. That's the kind of attention that we need from a sponsor. Nobody wants to be the 17th conversation in a day. So clarification about priority and intention, I think, is something we can help clients shift around too, because they're too close to it. They don't think about it.
Well, and I speak sarcasm fluently. And so for some people that you get to know, be like, I'm happy to continue to take your money for nothing. You can keep paying me and we can keep going. I'm happy to do that, but I don't think you're going to be happy about that. And I don't think your leadership team's going to be happy about that either. And usually I get a chuckle out of that because it's like, let's just be real and talk like real people. Sometimes I think we put this professional hat on and we think that we should be this CSM who has it all together. And I think sometimes we forget to just be human and have a very direct but real conversation, because the other person you're talking to is a real person too, right?
And I think that comes back to modeling from the leadership too. Like Jenelle, you had mentioned, like if you're CSM and you're struggling to find that in internal motivation, like that's something you can work with your leader on. And also that, us as leaders should show, like, we're willing to have those hard conversations. You're willing to be sarcastic and like take off your professional hat. And like, that's what's going to make you good at your job. And I think giving your team that safety net of your initial reaction is going to be like, what were you doing? You're gonna be like, cool, did it work? Did you try it? How'd it go? And that support, I think, can help mitigate some of those issues.
I agree. Good call.
Yeah, good call. Awesome. Thank you, anonymous attendee, for the question. Our next question comes from Nancy. Nancy asked, and this is actually kind of follow on from the last question, 8 tips on how to help customers take it more seriously from the beginning. and see the direct correlation between compliance and ROI. I think we touched on that a little bit already, right? Getting involved in the early stages, making sure that, like, for example, during a kickoff call, the key stakeholders are on the same call with some of the individual contributors and make sure everybody's aligned. We're all on the same page, right? Those are opportunities for us to make sure everybody's on the same page or raise red flags. But Jenelle, I know you had some additional commentary on this.
I just wanted to be, for me, it's kind of a duh. If you don't do this, we can't do that. If you don't participate and make choices here, I can't get you where you intend to go. If you don't get involved and help drive decisions, then we're not going to succeed or achieve the goals that were set out from the beginning. So it's a direct correlation. Their compliance or their participation or their willingness to get in and help you move that ball down the field, move the needle, whatever your term is, right? But if they're not willing to, then you get to tie it directly back to, then why are we here? Why did you pay for this product? If you're not willing to do what I need you to do, then why are you spending the money? And sometimes it's hard to ask that question, but I've had to ask that question. And you have to be willing to get uncomfortable to push some individuals, because again, there are so many reasons why you have a customer who pays for something and then doesn't provide you with what you need to get them successful in the product. You were the linchpin. You were the one in the middle that should be able to stand up to that customer and say, we can't get to B if you don't do A. And until you do A, we're stuck. And so you can spin your wheels, we can keep spending money, but this is where we are.
Yeah. I think visuals are real helpful in this situation too. Throw up that project plan. If they see that, hey, we can't move out of phase 1 to get to phase 15 until we have these things, it just kind of visually is like, we're going to throw things off track.
Yeah. Exactly. Good call, Katie. Yeah. And this is why I insist on kickoff calls that the stakeholder who bought this thing has to be there, or a reasonable facsimile, a proxy that has the same level of power and influence as that key stakeholder. I've been in situations before back in my enterprise software days where the key stakeholder couldn't make the kickoff call and we postponed the kickoff call. Right? I'm sorry, we all gotta, it's just not going to work. Right? And so we push back and say, sorry, we have to reschedule this. It's too important to just kind of blow by it. Awesome. Thank you, Nancy, for your question. Our next question comes from Kelly. Kelly, thanks for joining us today. Kelly asks, what suggestions do you have for an approach to change management expectations in situations where the CSM is not brought in until the end of onboarding after sales training? Actually, and Toby, looks like you want to jump into this right out of the gate. This actually happened with one of my clients. We told him you got to bring the CSM in from the start. That's how we solved it. That was the root cause of the problem. But Toby, what have you got for Kelly?
Yeah, if that introduction doesn't happen until after training and the customer has a perception that they're now fully functioning and should be working effectively, then the job is a little bit of a mop-up. That first question becomes assessment. And I loved where you were going a minute ago, Jenelle, about it's not just being a cheerleader and encouraging and celebrating their progress. Sometimes it's tough messaging. And when we see poor adoption numbers, when you go into the admin side and see that half the users have never logged in, that's a very clear signal that something didn't work. And too often it's that they didn't feel that it was necessary. They didn't understand the why. But there's things that we can often see even well past that. The ship has sailed, the customer's off and running. And so a lot of it is starting to also ask, how do we start to build some energy around this? How do we create a bit of a movement? And so even if all of that pre-work was done and you're only showing up lately, what a great time to ask, how did you find our implementation process? What questions came out of this for you? I see half the users aren't engaging yet. Should we do a quick reboot? Should we do a series? And I realize that some of these comments, they're not going to work at every level because there's only so much time and depending on the number of clients that you're managing. But so oftentimes it's just that there hasn't been a connection made. and it's felt transactional. Those are the worst cases, right? And so if the customer's flat-footed, if they're not activating yet, and you're just now showing up, you do have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions with that consultative hat. And you show up as a problem solver, meeting them where they're at instead of where you want them to be. So
Well, I
that
have
would
a
be my
question for everybody. Have you ever had a client that said, well, the team just won't do it? I bought this tool for my sales team. I told them how it's going to benefit them. I told them all the things they're going to get done faster, better, quicker, but they just won't do it.
You got a weak leader.
the carrot and stick thing too, right? If there's no incentive or disincentive, then it's completely elective. So no one should be surprised that people opt out of something that's hard and makes them feel like a novice.
So there was a situation that I had where I was running. So when I built one of the early customer success teams back in 2008, there was a process that we needed in order to be as effective as possible that required the sales team to fill out some stuff so that, you know, my scoping team would be able to have a single call with a customer, because this is something that the sales team was bitching about. It's taking too long to figure out the scope of this thing. And I said, okay, then I need you to get these 12 questions answered. And we started with the carrot. And we said, get these 12 questions answered. Then my team can go in and have a really efficient call, and we can be done in an hour. Because what the answers to those questions will give my team the focus they need to answer, you know, to ask the right questions and allow us to come up with a scope that is relatively accurate. And they talked a big game and said, okay, yeah, we'll do that. But they didn't do it. I said, okay. So moving forward, I sat down with the head of sales and I said, okay, let's change this from a carrot. Let's go from asking to requiring. In order for you to change the deal from open to closed won so you can get paid, you have to fill out this information.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. So this is what I say to people. So I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. to take the dogs outside and make a cup of coffee and figure out, like, I don't want to do that, but I do that. I don't want to go through all the admin work as a CSM to enter it into systems because it's time consuming and it's stuff I've already done. And I don't want to do that, but I do it because it's part of my job. So for me, I'm left in confusion by leaders that say, well, they just won't do it.
Yeah.
Why is it an option? It's part of their job that they're getting paid for. So in my opinion, there's no, well, they just won't. It's okay. Well, then we need to figure out how to implement that so that they do, because just saying you don't want to do something when your company is paying for a new product and you're digging your heels in is not productive. And it's never a positive solution.
Well, so it doesn't look good for the leader. It doesn't look good for the leader.
No.
It's like, dude, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
But that goes back to the accountability thing, Andrew, that we talk about.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have trouble holding other people accountable for so many different reasons, but it's absolutely critical, especially in our topic of change management. If you're not able to hold people accountable, if you're not able to drive those things, then it's a you issue. It's not, you know,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I find this with like young leaders too. And I know I struggled with this too. As soon as I started adopting teams, you don't want to use the stick because you're new, you were just in their shoes. And a lot of times what I've done with helping in adoption is equipping those leaders. And again, I know I've used this like 8 times, but like creating that environment and even gamifying things, like give them, if it's as simple as using a dashboard, we'll use Andrew's example. Like if you don't put this in here, you're not getting paid. Go into their team meetings with them and be like, hey, so-and-so leader, can you pull up the report that our product is helping you use? And when it shows up and there's nothing in there and you can kind of call out people for saying like, hey, none of you put this in here.
What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like that. If you keep doing that on a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly basis, however often you want them using your systems and your product, it's going to show that team that their leader is looking at this, that they're not going to stop asking them for it. So they better, to your point, they better start doing their job and get in there.
I love that, Katie.
Exactly.
That's a great idea.
Easier with sales because they'll do anything if you're going to not pay them.
That's true. That's so true.
It's a little harder. You got to find different reports for them.
I think we also make an assumption about, and executives too, people just won't adopt it. I think there's this inherent assumption that not only are people there to get paid, but that they're engaged in the work on some level.
Yeah.
And coming out of COVID, I remember Gallup published their engagement statistics, and the number was something like only a third of folks self-identify as engaged. And these numbers are astronomical. Think about that. 2 out of 3 employees at our clients are either apathetic and they're just kind of going through the motions, or they're legit. They're totally checked out, you know? And so if we don't recognize that, oftentimes when we hear that, but my team just won't do it, there's a weak leader component, but there's also this lack of awareness about how their culture works. And so I do think oftentimes it's nice to challenge them and ask them, tell me about what past successes you've had. Have you guys ever changed successfully and intentionally?
Right.
And we can use that as a way to remind them of how they activated. Celebrating some of those past pieces gives us a bit more confidence as we navigate the next change. But no, good discussion around they just won't. So
yeah, for sure. Toby, do me a favor, hit the done button on Kelly's. We got another question here from, and just a reminder, okay, we're a few minutes past the hour. We're going to keep answering questions here for probably another 10 minutes. Danny asks, and I saw none of you volunteer for this, but I actually would like to answer this. What is your recommendation to drive adoption usage to the platform for a startup org working with enterprise customers? Having come from that, I have definitely something to say. It feels like the customers are putting the ownership on me as a CSM to drive their user adoption, yet the users have shown resistance to the change, embracing the platform. So first of all, Danny, your first mistake is you need to enlist the help of a key stakeholder. I talked about this before. Your job is an enabler, right? You are there to enable the key stakeholders. There are people in that organization that are responsible for bringing you in, for signing on the dotted line. They care about getting a return on their investment. Okay, the best thing that you can do is help them understand their role in driving adoption and then arm them with the tools that they can use. That includes things like copy around the case for change, copy around the what's in it for me, a sample communications pyramid. Here's how we should be communicating. All of these things that Toby talks about in his course around the tools that you can use for effective change management. You should develop kind of this generic toolkit that's applicable for your customer base that you can then be able to walk in and say, hey, listen, I understand that you've got a lot on your plate and you're looking at stuff a mile wide and an inch deep, and I want to make this as easy for you as possible. But you need to be the one that drives the change. I cannot. I'm a vendor. I have very little influence over your team members. You, on the other hand, have a lot of influence. And I want you to look like the smartest person at your company for bringing us in, for embracing us. So here are some tools for you to use. That, from my experience, would be the best thing that you could do for yourself and your organization. Jenelle, Toby, Katie, please chime in here with anything else, or if you disagree.
Well, no, I was just thinking, Andrew, that the reason that CSMs are so powerful is because I use the wheel and spoke example, right? So the CSM, if you're at the hub of that wheel and the customer needs something, you're uniquely positioned to go to product, to go to marketing, to go to sales, to go to finance, to get them what they need. And so you have visibility into all of the different data points that you need your customer to track. You have your pulse on all the different data points your company wants you to track as your customer is adopting something. And so that's why CSMs can be so powerful. It means you have an inquisitive and curious mind and you're always asking questions. It means you're not afraid to roll up your sleeves and do some research and really dig into things to find the answer and be proactive for what your customer needs. So I think embracing the fact that as a CSM, you are powerful in your role if you can embrace that process or that persona of, you're an enabler. You are the one to empower your customer because you have the ability to touch on everything that they need internally. So, my advice is just own it and roll with it because it's so much fun when you do.
The one comment I'd make about enterprise, and it's difficult if you've never lived in that 10,000 plus employee organization. and I realize enterprise can start a little bit smaller, but that's often what we picture, right? Is the Fortune 500. And at a certain size, so many of these employees have a very narrow experience because there's such a volume of work that they have to be very, very deep in it to manage just their slice of a transaction or their piece of the activities that support the whole. And so one of the best things that we've done with clients is to actually prep them for a facilitation of their stakeholders when we're not in the room. Otherwise, that's the role we'll often play. But even bringing in people just a little upstream or downstream that may or may not be impacted. When your client convenes like that, what they're doing is they're actually committing themselves around this initiative to their peers. And so all of a sudden, they're going to be asking different questions. It's one thing if you as a CSM are helping to lead the conversation, it's different if they know you won't be there. But even if all we're doing is saying, here's how it used to happen and here's how it happens tomorrow, does this impact you, group that is upstream of me? What about you, group downstream? It does two things in my mind. One, it validates that we understand the disruption we're introducing. But two, it puts other people on notice that we're taking some kind of action. And so big enterprises, it's so many slivers oftentimes that unless we do that, it's really hard to affect the change. We'll insert something, we'll break people upstream, and instead of saying it was poorly implemented, they'll say this product is useless.
I love that, Toby. That's great.
That's one of the reasons why I always proposed, especially when I was working with the big enterprises, starting small. Right. When you start too big, it's just that much harder to get everybody on the same page. Right. Start with we very much went back in my days at Business Objects. We were huge fans of the land and expand. Right. So let's land with a small group. Let's get people that are excited. Let's build those internal advocates and those fans to help drive adoption for us. And then let's turn them loose on others within their organization on our behalf. And that had just an outsized impact on not just driving adoption of that particular solution, but opening up opportunities for us in other organizations. We did that at a large bank, North American bank, and we started with one small installation, and by the time I left 5 years later, we had 18 different installations in that bank, both on the commercial side as well as the retail side of the bank. So, and it's that same playbook.
Awesome.
Love the land band. I would add to that. Oftentimes we discover it's a shadow IT function that's started to engage us. It's within their signing authority, and it may not be what our sales team wants. We want the single highest person with the biggest pocketbook. But rarely do I see somebody saying, despite your results, shame on you, right? And so taking that initiative, finding somebody that's hungry for something better is far superior to that apathetic or weak leader that's only going to mail it in. So land and expand is really beautiful because you can have much more intimate conversations. That's great.
I think it goes back to Janelle's point earlier too, of just going back to some of the people who signed and saying, nope, you got to give me more. I remember early days at Skupos, I was the first enterprise client manager. We had no idea what we were doing with enterprise. Enterprise had no idea what they were about to do with our software. It was a big black hole, but it was new and it was different. And the biggest thing I would get as an ECM was, we want to be different than our competitors. We want to use this to differentiate ourselves. Okay, how are you going to do that? I don't know, because I don't know what you have in there. We didn't know what we had in there. Nobody knew. And so you have to work, I think, really strongly with leadership and kind of get on that journey with them and be like, again, I'm going to create that environment for us to do this, but I'm going to need you on this ride with me. What specifically do you want to do better than competitors? Who in your organization can I work with? And then start that land and expand. What's the team that you think is going to grasp onto this the most? Let me start there. And then let's start making connections. So I know it's not a fun place to be, Danny. Like there's a lot of pressure, but there's also a lot that you can do from that role. And then you can really formulate that partnership, do the land and expand. And sales is going to come to you and be like, you are a rock star. Help me do this again. Let's go get another enterprise client. And then it'll start to get easier and you'll know the questions to ask and who to start working with and have use cases in your back pocket to help along.
I love that.
And that's exactly what happened with me. I earned the nickname Gravy. Okay. Okay. I earned the nickname Gravy. I swear. I ran into somebody years later who I'd never worked with. He's like, yeah, they talked about this guy named Gravy. I'm like, yeah, that's me. Because you get me involved, you follow my playbook, it's all gravy after that.
Love that.
Awesome. Danny, thanks for the question. I think we got time for maybe one more. Vidya asks, how can we effectively manage client communication and ensure a prompt response when a client suddenly stops communicating despite the project progressing smoothly? Are there specific change management strategies that can help in reestablishing contact and addressing potential underlying issues? And Toby, you just jumped in here. Looks like you got an answer for this.
I'll kick it off. I think that oftentimes it's that the pain isn't the most painful thing they're experiencing it, right? They've gotten to a place of comfortable enough. Of course, we want to continue to expand and we want them to fully experience our solution. But yeah, when they go quiet, it's usually because there's something else that's demanded their attention.
Yeah.
And so for my part, we have all of this ability to see details within our different platforms. And so I know it's going to vary, but even little things about just calling attention to what you're able to observe from your seat is really powerful. We assume clients are monitoring usage. We assume that they're talking with their teams and getting that kind of feedback. So often we can see really powerful details on the back end. And what that shows up like is, instead of, I need your time and attention, even if it's just sending across saying, hey, I'm seeing this, just be aware of it. It's a nice way to kind of open up that conversation, because you have expert perspective when it comes to the platform and the solution. So when clients are deviating, helping to identify that deviation is something that these clients may not even realize. They might think they're in the gravy frame of their implementation. Life is easy.
Gravy, baby.
Gravy.
Gravy.
And there's a lot of reasons why people go silent.
Yes.
There's so many different reasons. And so again, get to the root cause of what's happening. Is there a change in management? Is there another priority that took over? Did they get acquired? I mean, that's where your research skills online are really good, to look at press releases, to look at activity that's happening on the website or on the LinkedIn page. I go there to kind of figure out. And it's also why you don't have just one contact.
That's exactly what I was waiting for. That's
you
why
have to have multiple.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you pull that pin out and they're no longer and you have no one to talk to, I mean, that's, you got to have more
contact, single point of failure.
That's right.
Having, and don't underestimate the power of people who may just be rank and file, right? There may be people that don't have a whole lot of influence, but if they're willing to talk to you, if they're willing to befriend you, if you are in a role where you can go out on site and you sit down and have coffee with them and befriend them, these are people that can feed you, and you say, hey, listen, I want to get some G2 from you, and that won't come back to you, right? Those people can be incredibly valuable to you.
I love that though, Andrew. Single point of contact, single point of failure. It's so true.
Awesome. All right. We're at the end of our time that we've got for today. I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think, it's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Hacker, Success Coaching. I want to thank my guests for spending the time with us, for the ideas, the thoughts, the insights, the best practices that you shared. So thank you once again. One final note, great CS leaders know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created the CS Leadership Roundtable, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. Once again, we hope to see you next month on July 10th, when we'll discuss transforming customer success with digital technologies. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your week and month. See you next time.
I love your experiences, Jenelle and Katie. Andrew and I have traded word stories and complaints so many times, but you're both also dealing in, I mean, we all have these different ecosystems that we're operating in. And so turning salespeople into CSM people and not being so fixated on the compensation mechanics has got to be a feat. I love sales guys because they're really easy to figure out, but they also, I hate trying to sign comp plans because they figure out invariably how to break it. So
a friend of mine who called me up one day and she said, so I want to I want to transition my account managers to customer success managers. Is it just as simple as changing their title? I just laughed at her.
Sure.
Well, I was working with an organization not too long ago, and one of our global sales leaders came to me. We were having a drink after an event, and he's like, to be honest with you, I don't even know what CS does. And I'm like, how long have you had CS in this organization and you don't know what it does? That's a problem.
Yeah.
Like it's still out there. We're still faced with a lot of people that don't understand the value, don't know how to quantify the value, are terrified of the value, or are just stuck to the old net new, net new, net new, net new. We're throwing cash at the wall, and that's what's going to keep us. And it's not working. So, I mean, for me, it's just about education and helping people understand really what is the value of a true CSM that embraces their role.
How many of those people do you think really don't understand or are viewing customer success as a threat?
I think it's a big threat.
Yeah. Well, it should. I 100% agree. Getting them in the door. So everything's changed in the last, 2 decades, right? Back in when I got into this business, the sales process was 9-12 months. There was a lot of evangelism. We're answering RFPs, blah, 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 blah. They sign on the dotted line. And then maybe if they're lucky, 9 months later, they get to see the thing in action for the first time. But they've already spent 80% of their budget, and then they got to spend the next 5-6 years depreciating the investment as well as paying 20% maintenance fees. And nobody's going to go to their boss and say, "Hey, I think we made a bad decision."
No, it's a career ender. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But these days, they're only getting, and back then, all of that effort was because the customer wasn't as educated on what it is they were buying. These days, you're shortlisted before you know the customer is even interested in what you have. So they've done a tremendous amount of homework. And I'm not taking anything away from the salespeople out there, but getting them in the door isn't as much of a heavy lift anymore. It's all about keeping them. And that's where customer success, and that's where when Todd and I recognized this a decade ago, we said, you know what? This shift to the subscription economy, the post-sales teams are going to become a hell of a lot more important and a hell of a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
Because it's that post-sales, we're playing a long game here. We're trying to drive customer lifetime value. That, not saying that getting them in the door isn't important, but keeping them around is a lot more important.
Well, and you spend less money in the long run. When you look at the cost of acquisition, when you look at the money that's brought into the company through referrals and cross sells and upsells and expansions, I mean, to me, it's now at the point where we're at duh, but you still have leaders who are, in my opinion, former sales guys that are still convinced that their way is still the right way. And you're always going to come up against those people. But I just think for us and our community, it's more about empowering our CSMs to be bold, to be courageous, to be trained in how to have those conversations so they can really be effective, and make sure that we're highlighting as much as we can. And I think we do a great job of this, but in our industry and LinkedIn, we're talking about why CS is valuable, not trying to befuddle sales, but show sales that, look, and this is what I do with my new salespeople. What are your metrics? What are your KPIs? Because all I want to do is maximize those. I'm here to make you look good if you give me a shot at that. But I think a lot of organizations still pit sales and CS against one another, whether they realize it or not,
I think
because we're naturally salespeople, right? We're easy salespeople.
Yes,
we're not pushing,
exactly.
But everything we're doing is making them enjoy the solutions that much more.
Right.
And I think that's threatening a little bit to the sales side. When all we want to do is, just like you said, if we're working together in tandem, it's a great pair.
Everybody's making money. Right. Exactly.
But when that breaks, then everything else kind of crumbles underneath.
Part of the problem is the compensation plan. The comp plans have not caught up, especially on the sales side, have not caught up with the reality of the subscription economy.
Yeah.
So
that's very true.
You
I would love
pay
to
people, the way they pay them.
Yeah. 20 years ago, we had a hunter-farmer sales model in telecom.
Yeah.
And that's not so different from what we're talking about. But instead of those farmers just calling up to renew, today we're demanding that they show value. And I feel like there's a real breakdown between the people that are just throwing stupid money at companies, these venture capitalists or private equity guys. They don't know how to value CSM. And so that top line growth is a big deal. But if it's our sales teams taking all the new functionality out to new logos rather than letting CS introduce that into existing accounts, then we diminish the value. CS is more than capable of rolling these things out, right? We get excited about awesome stuff. But yeah, I saw that with a client about 2 years ago, and it just kind of blew my mind because the sales guys were all high-fiving and CS is killing themselves to keep these customers at the table and figure out what they just got sold.
Yeah.
Exactly. Some of the best, most cooperative organizations I've seen is where they've kind of reconstituted the business and said, okay, sales and customer success are going to work together. We're going to have a sliding scale comp plan. No, you're not going to get paid on this deal until the customer is fully live and adopted, blah, 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 blah. Those situations are really rare, but they were the most effective, in my experience. So
we've changed comp plans 3 times this year.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's fear. If I change the comp plan, my guys are going to leave. Do you know how many people are looking for a job right now? You're going to be able to hire again. We're in that
that's also my thing.
where
no one wants to leave because no one wants to look. So you at least have them for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
That's the crappy part, right? If they don't want to leave, but they don't want to adopt, then now they're just mailing it in and collecting a check.
Right. Exactly.
And that's not fair to anybody.
No. Katie, I got a question for you, and I can also just follow up separately, but I'm curious to this point of comp plans and shifting account managers into the CS world. What's your thought around the comp plans and how you're making that shift? Is there at-risk
that was a base.
I don't know what my thoughts are anymore. I've had too many of them. It's interesting. We also have a component where what we've done, which makes it, and sorry, getting in the weeds a little bit, but we took part of our old sales team and made them CSMs and AEs because that's how they were truly doing their jobs. But then the other half got mad. They were staying. So we brought them over. So our AEs were not supposed to be selling at all when we originally started the organization. Now they sell a sub-component of our solution, which actually should be subscription. So we should be selling it in a yearly thing, but they do it cycle by cycle. So they are still comped on those. But then as a team, we're it's going to be more renewal based. We've had a lot of account shifting this year too, because we've had people leave, we've had role shifts. So for 2025, they should be comped on their own renewals and upsells and their own offers is what we do, literally Gatorade buy 2 for $1 type offers, truly offers. Yeah. And then our BD team is in charge of net new sales. So that's kind of how their comp plan will work. But now we're introducing actually a true CSM function underneath the AEs. And their comp plan is the one I'm more concerned about because I do want them tied to renewals and seeing a piece of that kind of pie because they are helping to do that. So but then we have to figure out how to slot them also into the offers because they're supporting those as well. So it's a mess. So I don't know if you have any thoughts that would be helpful. I'm more than happy to set up time to talk and pick your brain on thoughts around that.
I mean, I think you meld them together. I think if you put together the account manager and the CSMs and overlap their KPIs, right, drive them to work together to achieve those things, you're going to be more apt to get those results.
And that's what we did with one of our early clients is we created these business units. There's these operational units. So we basically took an account executive and a senior customer success manager, and we put them together with a more junior customer success manager, a sales engineer, and an analyst. So, okay, you're a pod, and here's your book of business, and you are responsible for growing your book of business. So we adjusted the comp plan so that sales was incented not just to bring customers in, but to bring the right customers in that they could grow.
Yeah.
Right with the customer success team.
and the customer success manager was incented to ensure that the right customers were coming in and that they were driving adoption, and it worked really well. And what we did is we looked at after a quarter, we said, okay, which one of these two leaders of these teams, the sales side and the customer success time, which one is kind of rising to the top as a leader? And we then assigned that person as the leader. In some cases, we had two strong people. We made them co-leaders of the team.
Yeah.
But we basically, and because they were working together really well, there was no, oh, you're the boss type of thing.
Yeah.
There was still respect. Everybody worked together, and it was a really effective way of going to market. And it was quite successful.